Come one, come all to Twisted Metal Month, a brand new yearly tradition for under 10 hours where we chart the rise and fall of one of Sony's longest dormant series. Each year we are going to take a look at 4 games that relate to the series in some way. This year we'll cover the birth of Twisted Metal all the way through the 4th entry, 1 week at a time. Since this series at its core is about a killer clown in an ice cream truck, and since Twisted Metals 2 through 4 all released on Halloween of their respective release years, October seemed like a better month than any to do this. Welcome to the festivities. Twisted Metal was one of Sony's most recognizable series in the late 90s and early 2000s as its style mixed heavy metal and edgy gameplay with dark undertones. There were a lot of these games released, especially on the PlayStation 1. Its hard-hitting vehicular combat was an instant hit with players, especially those who wanted to play with their friends. The mysterious and macabre Tournament of Mayhem kept players coming back for more. But Twisted Metal wasn't always a given. Behind the scenes, the story of Twisted Metal is about last chances for some and new beginnings for others in an infant game studio. In this video, we are going to take a look at how the game came to be, where the idea came from, and how all the moving parts came together to make the first entry happen. And an under 10 hours video wouldn't be complete without taking a look back at the game and how it's aged. Welcome to Twisted Metal. Every piece of art has its creator, and probably the most notable face associated with Twisted Metal is David Jaffe. Jaffe was looking down the barrel of a gun in the 90s. He was, and still is, a pretty strong personality who was considered especially hard to work with in the early days of his career. After working his way up from beta tester at Sony ImageSoft that was originally supposed to help pay the bills while he waited for Hollywood to call, he pissed off many developers as he went with his my way or the highway attitude. Sony gave him one last chance to prove he could work nicely with others, telling him there was a group of developers emerging in Utah that could use his help making a game. This was going to be his last chance before Sony cut him loose, so he had to make it count. In Utah, the graphics company Evans & Sutherland was trying to expand from their military and commercial roots and move into other industries. Sony contracted Evans & Sutherland to help them make games going forward. Jaffe flew out to Utah with game designer Mike Giam and Sony Santa Monica's Alan Becker to see what the simulation company had to show them. Jaffe was blown away, saying that once he stepped inside the simulator of a cockpit and flew around in a virtual landscape, he knew the technology was going to be game-changing. The question became, however, what game were they going to make out of it? After returning to Earth from Cloud 9, the executives who attended the trip found themselves in a jam. Literally. While sitting in traffic on LA's 405 freeway, the idea suddenly struck them. What if they gave players machine guns and rocket launchers to blow away all the other cars in their path? Twisted Metal, or Battle Cars as it was called by Jaffe in its infancy, was born. Following the epiphany, the idea was pitched to the developers in Utah. They really didn't like the violent ideas, so they spun the idea into a working prototype of a pizza delivery simulator.
At the time, that sounded really cool, and it would have been such a disaster because how many times can you sequel a pizza delivery game?
I don't remember how we somehow talked them out of the pizza delivery game. I'm not very articulate now, and I certainly was less articulate then, and it may have simply been me on a phone call going, "Are you out of your mind?"
Sony declined the family-friendly idea and decided to move forward with their car combat angle. Multiple developers left Evans & Sutherland in order to form SingleTrac, a brand new game studio who would be working on Twisted Metal, as well as a flight-based combat game called Warhawk. Sony forwarded the company $2 million to get the projects off the ground. The 2 games were developed in close proximity to each other and shared the same codebase to start off with. So with Jaffe heading a project as his last chance and SingleTrac as a new company trying to prove its worth, Twisted Metal was created with passion and excitement. Throughout development, Jaffe viewed Twisted Metal as a fighting game in vehicles, which to a certain point I kind of see. You can strategically combo your opponents by blasting them with a freeze rocket and then wailing on them while they're frozen. However, this isn't exactly a one-to-one comparison to Mortal Kombat on wheels, a metaphor Jaffe liked to use a lot back then. So when focus testing began and hardcore fighting game fans were brought into play and give feedback, they nothing less than shat all over it, leading to Jaffe calling a spade and calling it a career.
We had this focus test with these hardcore gamers that came in, and they just tore the game apart. This was towards the end of it. We were about to put it into marketing, get money from marketing to advertise it, and they played it, and it was the whole night they were making fun of it.
Yeah, the description of it was it's a fighting game in cars. And so the focus test was comprised of hardcore fighting game gamers. And they just didn't really get, how this was a fighting game in cars.
I said, I'm going to start looking for a new job tomorrow because they're going to fire me because this is a disaster.
But when the game was released in November of 1995, people weren't dumping on it anymore. Oh no. Critics were giving it good review scores for the most part, with Electronic Gaming Monthly, or EGM for short, awarding it Game of the Year.
I was stunned because somebody told me, oh, you guys got Game of the Year. And I'm like, what are you talking about, right? And then it turns out, and I won't mention the magazine because I don't think legally we can, but we ended up getting Game of the Year from the most prestigious game magazine that was out at the time. And it was amazing that it all actually worked. I mean, this was the first big game I had ever done. It was the first game these guys in Utah had ever made. And we ended up with a game that a lot of people really, really loved, to the point that we were getting these major awards. And so it all worked out. I have no clue how. Maybe we all just got really lucky. I don't know. But it was cool. It was very, very cool.
Jaffe's career was saved and SingleTrac was put on the map, much to the delight of Sony's wallets. By the end of 1996, the game had sold 1 million copies and generated $28 million in revenue for Sony. Those numbers seem small by today's standards, but with the game only costing about $850,000 to make, I'd say that's a win. If I took $85 and turned it to $2,700, I wouldn't be complaining about it. But now let's turn our attention to the game itself. Twisted Metal is a competition put on by the godlike man known as Calypso. Calypso is a creepy guy. His wiry red hair matching his melted-off face that looks like Nick Cage in Face Off after his face is swapped. Every year he puts on this tournament, pitting drivers against one another in a battle to the death, and granting the driver left standing one wish of their choosing, even things deemed impossible. This year's tournament takes place in the distant future of 2005, during the fictional 10th anniversary of Twisted Metal. The game takes place across 6 different levels that take place in Los Angeles. The first arena is deliberately designed to be small in order to let players get a feel for the combat and control before moving on. The controls are definitely a bit odd, as they were mapped to the genre that didn't really exist in a mainstream way before its release. In a way, Twisted Metal uses tank controls, with up on the D-pad being accelerate and down being reverse, with left and right moving the car in respective directions. However, you also have the option to use square to accelerate and circle to reverse. Triangle allows you to use turbo, and X is handbrake and allows tighter turns. You shuffle through weapons using the front shoulder buttons, with R2 firing your machine gun and L2 firing your projectiles and special attacks. Before playing one, I didn't realize just how many types of weapons there were in this first release. While there were plenty of series staples like the fire rockets, homing missiles, and power shots, there are plenty of others that only appear in this game or are changed down the road, like oil slicks, tire spikes, and temporary landmines. This means that there are a lot of ways to attack your opponents and strategize ways to combo. The method of repairing your vehicle is pretty different in this game as well, and it's something I could take or leave. In order to fix your vehicle when it's running low on health, you need to make your way to an electrical pad. There are many of these scattered around the maps, and after you use them, they have a considerable cooldown time, making it difficult to exploit without some serious strategizing. They are marked on the map as flashing white X's, which seems simple enough, but the map itself doesn't do many favors for the player. It only shows the relative location of other drivers and repair pads, and it does not show obstacles or walls at all. So there are times when a repair pad looks like it's next to you, but it's another street over. Eventually, though, I just learned the layouts of the maps and just memorized where the pads were, making it much easier to find them. Instead of relying on the map to give me a general idea of where they were, I knew their exact locations. As you win and progress through the tournament, more and more opponents are added to the fight. By the time you get to Suburbia, you're battling 8 other vehicles. It gets outright chaotic, and this is where I constantly got a game over on my first few playthroughs. At first, this game is difficult to control because it doesn't really handle like anything else at the time, or now really. but once it clicks, you'll be whipping around and destroying things like it's nothing. In my opinion, there isn't a bad level among the different arenas, but that said, they are very primitive as that's all that was possible at the time. The Freeway Free For All is a bit too much like a circular racetrack, as you'll be traveling around it while other arenas are more or less like a bowl or a square. It lends itself far less to the car combat genre than it would a standard racing game. You'll still retain the free movement, but because of the layout, you'll just be driving around and around the track looking for other drivers. My personal favorite level is the rooftop level with the destructible centerpiece that opens up to a new area with weapons and a healing station. And jumping from a secret hallway across a wide gap and landing on a rooftop on the other side was so much fun. But to me, one of the biggest draws of Twisted Metal for me has always been the characters and the vehicles. In the first Twisted Metal, there are 12 vehicles to choose from. Each of the vehicles are unique in stats and shape, as well as what special attack they use. These stats are broken down into 4 categories: special attack power, speed, handling, and armor. The game does an excellent job of balancing the vehicles so that no one vehicle is overpowered. However, depending on your playstyle and strategy, there is a good chance you'll find a car you're unbeatable with. So if you end up playing, give yourself time to experiment and get comfortable with the selection of vehicles. But what is even more interesting to me are the characters behind the wheel. Each of them have their own reasons to be competing in the tournament. Some are in it for themselves. The ghostly driver Scott Campbell, the ghostly driver of Spectre who shares the same name with the co-director of the game, wishes to be brought back to life. Other drivers are in it for the sake of other people. Angela Fortin, the driver of the dune buggy Pit Viper, is hired by the citizens of Los Angeles to kill Calypso and end the contest once and for all. Others are more bizarre. Needles Kane, the killer clown and driver of Sweet Tooth and the mascot of the series as represented in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, is competing to get his best friend back, only it turns out his best friend is a paper bag. But upon taking to the rooftops after your final test, facing Minion, the winner of the previous year's contest, the game ends with scrolling text explaining what happens. It feels like something is missing. That's because there is. Originally, the game was going to feature live-action cutscenes for every winner, but late into development they were cut after some more of the religious higher-ups took issue with them. According to Jaffe, they had no issues with the violence, but they didn't approve of the women in bikinis that surrounded Calypso on his throne of car parts. So every scene was scrapped and wouldn't reappear until Twisted Metal Head-On Extra Twisted Edition for PS2 as part of bonus content on the disc. Looking at them now, they're all pretty laughable. Sure, there are women in bikinis without any real speaking lines, a pretty crappy normal thing from the time, unfortunately, but they're little more than props doing nothing but stand there, really. The point is, it wasn't any more risque or crazy than anything else at the time. To me, though, it fits the Calypso brand. Like he's an all-powerful being, but he still feels the need to look cool by surrounding himself with women. But when you get past that, these cutscenes are really goofy and funny. They are B-movie scenes at best, and I mean that in a good way. It's so fun watching these ridiculous movies, especially after hearing how they were made. But while Twisted Metal 1 feels simple today, its impact on PlayStation cannot be denied. I mean, it was included on the PlayStation Classic, a sign of quality and care. In all seriousness, while the game might not set your world on fire now, the most important reason you would go back and play would be if it's still fun. And fun it is. Thank you so much for watching the first episode of the inaugural Twisted Metal Month on the channel. This is a project I've wanted to do for a long time now, and I finally have the time this year to make it happen. I hope you enjoyed the first episode as much as I enjoyed making it, and if you did, consider hitting the like button. What is your favorite Twisted Metal game? Leave it in the comments down below. If you want to make sure you don't miss the next 3 episodes of Twisted Metal Month, subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when it next releases. Lastly, if you want to support the channel directly so I can keep doing cool things like this, check out my Patreon in the link below. For $1 a month, you get videos only released there and early access to every video I make. I'd like to take a moment and thank my higher tier patrons, Okayla, Just Jessica, 8-Bit Jesus, Andrew Elmore, and Andrew Lang. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week for the next tournament.